Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us here on Mom Squad, the show where we talk all things parenting. I'm Maureen Kyle, and if you're like me, after the holidays, you never want to see another cookie again, or at least you say that until about January 15th. And maybe this is the year that you want to achieve those health goals. So today, we're going to talk to one of my favorite dietitians and moms, Kristin Kirkpatrick with the Cleveland Clinic. She shares the exact same advice that she's giving to all of her patients this year who want to start on a new track. And also joining me today, some fellow moms and my ladies in the studio, Holly Strano and Laura Queso. Thanks so much for doing this and sitting down and chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having
your
us.
Cookie Monsters.
Yes.
I mean, after the holidays, do you get like that where you're like, ugh, I've overindulged, I'm done, or I don't know, do you have health goals?
I go into broccoli mode for like 24 hours, I
Right?
feel like.
Yeah.
And then I'm back to, okay, I want to have this and that and the other thing again. Yeah.
Same with me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna meal prep this week, 5 days, chicken and broccoli, honestly our go-to.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
And then I'm kind of like, I'll start, you know, maybe this or that.
Boy,
but I do. I feel like a lot of people are that way.
Yeah, and spill the tea. Do you guys really, like everybody says, oh, I don't do New Year's resolutions, but do you? Especially when it comes to health goals? No,
I really don't either. Isn't that terrible?
I'm so sorry.
You don't?
I don't.
I do?
I do.
I don't
I say I don't, but then I'm like,
Like I'm gonna go to the gym more? Is that like a...
or just sort of like, hey, this is a new start. And I start to think about like, okay, well, 6 months until we're back into like bikini season.
yeah.
This is how it works for me. It's not that I don't have goals, because that sounds horrible. I just sort of in general have goals in life, because I feel like if I make one thing as a resolution, it stresses me out. Then I get anxious. So that's just how my personality works, if that makes sense.
No,
So I just kind of strive for various goals throughout the year.
Yeah. Laura, do you?
I do. I think throughout the year, I think the holidays, it kind of gives me a time to be like, you know what? I'm just gonna do me and not focus on everything. I guess the first of the year is a reset, but I don't make hard resolutions. I look at it more as like a reset.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I like that word, reset.
And we're going to talk about this too, because I feel like there's a couple times throughout the year, and this might be one of them. And I guess this is where I'm coming from too. You know, you're totally out of routine during the holidays in terms of what you do every day, because you're on most likely taking some vacation time or some time off. The kids are home. You get out of whatever normal eating habits you're into, because all of a sudden you have a ton of cheese in the refrigerator from the holidays. And it's sort of like, I feel like that first week of January, it's a natural reset of like, okay, let's clean things out. This year, okay, let's try and, you know, organize before we do go back to school or we do get back to the routine. So I think that's where I'm coming from, is like, okay, and it's January. What else do I have to do when it's cold outside?
You know, a good analogy I just thought of too is, as beautiful as all of our homes look during the holidays, we love, the lights and the tree, but isn't it a great feeling come January to get that out?
Yes.
Holly, it's so true.
Right?
Yeah. You love to put it up. I love to have the tree up and all that. But after I take it down, I'm like, oh, no more clutter.
So it's like the same thing with our bodies.
Exactly.
It's so true.
You kind of get into this natural, like, okay, I'm going to organize this and I'm going to organize that. And you know what? It's snowing outside. I'll go to the gym all of a sudden. I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of naturally fall into this. But there are also a lot of people who think, this is the year. Like this summer, I'm going to be the healthiest, or I'm going to, you know, fit into that pair of jeans, which Kristin and I talk about. She's one of my go-tos. I just adore her just because she's so realistic, and she's not going to tell you cut out all sorts of foods, but she really does set us on a path that would set us up for success. So take a listen to what she and I had to talk about. This is our tradition to sit here and talk about, okay, so how do I start a healthy routine this new year? Because by the time the holidays pass, everybody has overindulged. And I don't care who you are. I think everybody kind of has that mindset of like, okay, now I have to really buckle down here on my eating habits. What do you think? We've always talked goals, and I know, you know, it's easy to say, well, we should start with small goals, but everybody has those big goals of, okay, this year I'm definitely going to be able to get into that swimsuit, or I want to lose 15 pounds. Is it okay to kind of set a big goal first and then figure out how to do it?
Yeah, I think setting a big goal can be fine if we break it up into increments, right? So if our goal here is, I want to get into that swimsuit, I want to lose those 15 pounds, then let's break it down into increments. So that 15 pounds is not going to come off all in January and then we're done with our resolutions in February. It never happens that way. So really focusing on, okay, what is my age? What is my activity level? What am I able to do? Maybe my ability is to lose a half a pound a week, or maybe it's 1 pound. I also have really been talking a lot more with my patients to encourage them to make our goals more oriented to our metabolic profile. So it's very natural to, I always joke that every woman, at least everyone I know, and I'm guilty of this as well, has a pair of jeans stuck in the back of the closet that don't fit, but you're always like, one day I'm going to get into those jeans, right? And even though we laugh about that, those jeans are actually a much better assessment of what your metabolic goals are versus the scale, because it's going to look at your belly fat. So really kind of changing the semantics and saying, okay, my goal is not to lose 15 pounds, but my goal is to get my LDL and my cholesterol to come down. And what does it take to make that happen? That could be a combination of exercise. It could be a combination of limiting sugar. So really kind of taking those larger goals and chunking them. 15 pounds is great, but how does that happen? For me, is it going to be, all right, I need to have, let's say only one sugary treat every week, or I need to stop having a glass of red wine every night while I'm making dinner. So we all have things that keep us from our goals. We have to identify that. And sometimes what helps is seeking out that professional help well before New Year starts. So finding a dietitian, finding a health coach, finding someone who can hold your hand prior to January 1st as opposed to getting on the phone or a Zoom call or in person on January 1st and saying, okay, I want to lose 15 pounds. How does it work? Right? The best diet out there is one we're going to stay on for longer than 2 years. And so let's think about that. Whatever is going to be successful in losing weight quick is not going to work long term. And we're just going to be right back in the same situation next January.
Yeah. I want to ask you about diet, but before we get into some of those healthier eating habits and foods specifically, you mentioned age and you mentioned the jeans in the back of the closet. And I know among my friends, we usually talk about, gosh, what I used to do, I would be able to lose 5 pounds and now I can't. Am I just too old? Like, is it my age? So how does age play a factor? And can we get to those jeans that we wore 10 years ago, maybe pre-2 babies ago?
Right. So the distribution of fat sometimes changes as we age. So maybe we'd be able to get into those jeans, but it might look a little differently from when we stand in the mirror. Not to other people, but maybe when we look at our body and understand it might look a little different. We have some studies. We had some very strong studies come out last year out of Duke that looked at the fact that despite the fact that we all talk about how our metabolism just shoots down once we get over 40, metabolism doesn't change that dramatically until we get into our mid-60s. There's other things that really impact it. So our loss of muscle mass, muscle burns a lot more calories at rest than fat does. So as we lose muscle, what happens there is we just are not able to keep the same weight because we're just not those calorie burning machines anymore. So there's that component. There's also looking at, okay, are you in the place where you are perimenopausal or postmenopausal, where sometimes we see a little bit more challenge with blood sugar control and things like that. I have postmenopausal patients that say, man, I feel like I eat nothing and I can't lose 1 pound, right? So we do start seeing a little bit more of a challenge once we get into the age where we're peri and postmenopausal. I think that in general, we are probably less stressed in our 20s. We are probably more active in our 20s. I think those are things that really help to foster an easier time in losing weight and keeping it off. As we go through life, our stressors become larger. Adaptations such as having a baby to our body become larger. And so all of those kind of piled up really are what makes the difference. So it's not impossible. I don't think we should look at this and say, well, I'm 45, so I'm just destined to not be the weight I was at 25. But being realistic of what does a healthy metabolic profile look like in terms of your weight? Sometimes we have to lose belly fat to improve our liver enzymes, to improve our lipid panel, right? So that should be the ultimate goal. That is a goal of longevity, not of how great do I look in the mirror. And if we focus on longevity first, typically the pounds will come off a lot easier.
Yeah. so let's say somebody's sitting down, pencil and paper, and they're going, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm coming up with my plan. How do they go about it? Is it, and I want to get your take too on eliminating foods or food categories.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, if you got that pen and paper, you're sitting down, you want to talk about those goals, write them down. And then the next step is you're going to sit down with whoever is your support system, your family, your parents, your roommates, whoever that is, and say, hey guys, here are my goals. And I really want to achieve this year. Where do you think I'm most likely to do this? And how can you help me? Right? So we have to figure out who's going to derail and kind of get them out of the picture in terms of, okay, am I going to be able to lose these 15 pounds, or will my roommate continue to derail that? Right? So I think that's number one. Then number two is looking at what worked in the past and what didn't work. So this is such an easy concept, but really, I think what we neglect to look at is that things that worked in the past tend to work in the future. So if you, in the past, let's say 10 years ago, went keto and you lost 30 pounds and it was great, but you put it all back on, keto might not be the right approach for you, right? So looking at those things. And then I think the third thing is, we have studies looking at how important it is to look at our cultural, our religious, and our personal preferences when we're putting a dietary plan together, right? So look at, okay, I really want to do this type of dietary plan, but it's just, gosh, I don't really like kale, or I don't really like all that meat in the diet, right? That might not be the right thing that works for you. So I would say kind of take a step back, look at what worked in the past, look at what you actually enjoy doing, because you can only eat in a way that you don't enjoy for so long, and then you're just going to go back to bad habits, right? And that's why I said, like, maybe looking at very specific things. So I have patients that, okay, this month, we're just going to focus on limiting alcohol. We're not going to do anything else. Next month, it's going to be, we're going to limit the candy that we're having during the day. The month after that, late night eating, right? So we all have some sort of trigger or something that takes us away from these goals. So maybe kind of looking at those triggers and dealing with them one by one, as opposed to putting all of them in one bucket and saying, okay, I'm going to improve all these habits at once.
Do you have your patients track what they're eating, like every little bite during the day, to see what they're eating as accountability and to see, emotions and progress?
For some people, tracking can be really helpful. For others, it brings on a little bit too much more of obsession. And so for the people that get a little bit more fixated on it, they just start focusing too much on quantity and not on quality, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can't have another calorie because I had all of these. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day where their calories came from. It's just that they have little amounts of them. So I think it just depends on your personality type. There was just a study that we saw that was presented at the American Heart Association clinical sessions, scientific sessions, just last week. And it looked at individuals that were tracking each and every day, weighing every single solitary day. And then at the end of the study, what they found is that only 1 in 4 individuals actually estimated how healthy their diet was correctly. So when we think about what works for us, we have to also think about, what does health mean to us? And what can we actually achieve? Some people do great with tracking. It's an accountability measure. It's being able to look at this and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had 3 handfuls of pretzels. I thought I only had 1, but here I wrote it down and now I see I had a lot more. So it can be really great, but it depends on the personality type, right? I think from accountability standpoint, it's very useful. But not everyone falls into it well. They just kind of start tracking and then they're just become too obsessive with the tracking.
Yeah. Another piece of advice that I've always heard, and this might be another one where it works for some people, doesn't work for others, but the planning and prepping ahead, which I'm good one week and I'm bad the next, because if you tell a parent of, kids who are running around homework, sports, or whatever, you have to plan and prepare all these meals ahead of time. It's just sometimes not realistic. But do you think, how do we make that realistic, and does that help?
Well, I think it's a 2-step process. So it's number 1, planning it, and then also, where are you putting it? when you're walking into the kitchen. So again, if we look at the data, what we know is that things that are eye level, we're more likely to choose. So if you spend all day Sunday cutting up peppers and getting carrots and getting all that together, and then you put it all in that bottom drawer, you're actually less likely to choose it because you don't actually see it. So that can help in two different ways. What are something in my pantry, for example? Did I get a bunch of Halloween candy and my kid has it in the pantry? Take that out of your eye level because you're less likely to grab it. And also the second thing from that is that we need to take out the guilt and the shame and all the thing that comes along with buying things that are already pre-cut, right? Whatever makes it easier. So when people say, well, I love vegetables, but I don't have time to cut them, so I'm not going to have them at all. I'd rather you have the vegetable, even if you have to buy a pepper that's already cut, or you buy broccoli that's already put together in like little florets, right? So whatever makes it easier for you to just kind of get that into your body, do it. And don't fixate so much on the fact that you didn't get the kale and strip it yourself, right? Is that going to be more ideal? Can you control the process more? Absolutely. But you're still going to get that nutrient density. So I think we need to look at that. When we have the motivation and ability to prep, let's do it. When we have life getting in the way, and that's going to happen for all of us, then maybe we're going to go and we're going to buy broccoli florets as opposed to getting broccoli that's already in the crowns and we got to chop it up, right? So make it easy. And I think like the other thing we have to bring up here is that could mean getting things frozen, right? Get frozen blueberries, get frozen broccoli, get frozen peppers that are diced. Now, frozen is a great option, and we oftentimes think it's just not as nutrient dense. In reality, it can be more nutrient dense. So let's get some frozen things and just have those options in the freezer and the fridge so that we can grab. Yeah. When we don't have anything to grab, that's when we get on the phone and we start ordering the pizza.
Yeah. So one of the top searches in January of every year is, what is the best diet? And right. I know there's a lot of names for diets. There's, Mediterranean, there's DASH diet, there's Whole30. Is there anyone that you recommend that somebody might start with to see if it's right for them?
Yeah, I actually am a very big fan of the Mind diet. I just think as we look at the statistics on Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline, they're pretty grim in terms of looking at our aging population and what percentage of us will be more prone to get that. Doesn't mean that we can't prevent it. And the Mind diet is really where that comes into. So the Mind diet is a combination of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. So it stands for Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay. And it's really, what I like about it is the studies, the data is so strong. Just even moderate adherence to it, you have about a 30% reduction of risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. But what I love about it is it's so straightforward. So it's broken down into about 15 components. You got 10 components that you should be consuming every day, and then about 5 components that you want to limit your consumption of. So it's easy to follow. There's not a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's just, have more leafy greens, have more of cruciferous vegetables, have more nuts and seeds, right? So it's very easy to follow, and it's incredibly nutrient dense. So again, if we think about, okay, what's the most important thing in terms of my health? Your vascular system, your brain, your heart, all the areas of the body where blood flows, if we can keep those really healthy, we're actually going to benefit the entire body. So anything that's good for the brain is going to be good for the heart, it's going to be good for the liver, etc. Right? And it's easy to follow. So I think if I had to name a diet, I love the Mind diet. It's what I try and follow. And then where the professional comes in that can be really useful is, okay, I want to do a Mind approach, but I want it to be more moderate in carbohydrates because I'm postmenopausal. That's going to be better for me. Or I don't want it to include this. So how do you alter that diet so that it still makes sense to you? So it's a good base to start with. And it's something that we find high sustainability. So remember, the best diet out there is really one you're going to stay with long-term, and it's high in nutrient density. And the Mind diet tends to approach those two things pretty well.
So what exactly is the Mind diet? Mind stands for Mediterranean Intervention for neurodegenerative delay. Right? So let's just call it the Mind diet.
That's so fancy.
Right? So that's why you're just going to hear Mind diet. Nobody walks around saying that. So here are the 10 foods to include. This is what you eat: dark leafy greens, all other vegetables, berries, nuts, olive oil, whole grains, fish, beans, poultry, and guess what? Wine. You're allowed to have wine. So it's very similar, like she said, to the Mediterranean diet.
Think of Europe, yes.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Yes.
And then here are the foods to avoid. So this is the no-no list. Butter and margarine, cheese, red meat, fried foods, pastries, and sweets. So I'm sure anybody watching has one of those on that list where you're like, ooh, that's
Butter's
my
a hard one
downfall.
for me, but I love olive oil, so I can make that switch.
I never cook with butter.
I always cook
Ever.
with butter.
Never.
Yes.
Unless I'm making like a dessert. I use olive oil like it is. I mean, I'm Italian.
So am I.
You know, everything. Well, Holly, you're using a lot of butter?
I do use butter.
Like on what? All like your chicken dishes? Or?
Like a roll.
She's like, I just eat it.
I just pretty much eat it.
Smear it on stuff.
Right.
Like a roll.
And this is why I knew that this group would be fun because we have the Italian backgrounds in our families. So like olive oil, fish, like these type of diets, maybe if you do have that that Italian background, the Mediterranean background, that's maybe what you grew up on.
Right.
But I'm sure viewers don't know, I know you guys know that I had a grandma that lived to 105 and totally with it, had conversations right up until the last few days. And she told me, she goes, olive oil, red wine, garlic. That was her secret.
That's the key, folks.
And so it's interesting that now, you know, years and years after she was telling us this is what we're seeing. But those no-nos, those don'ts are really hard for people to extract from. Like for me, it's sweets.
Yeah,
like I could leave or take cheese, whatever. Like, but sweets for me is my downfall.
I find it really interesting too that you bring up your grandma because my grandpa Sam was the same.
Yeah.
Like literally, he actually drank some olive oil every day.
Oh gosh.
Really?
Yeah, he would do like a tablespoon
shot?
of it, in addition to cooking with it. Same thing with the wine.
Oh yeah.
My Uncle Marco, who was born and raised in Italy, same diet. I think he started drinking wine at age 5.
Right.
I mean, and it's amazing to me when you think of the way that culture is. I mean, it's almost like we've known this for years, but we're now just realizing, oh, this works.
They were
We just have to start our morning with a shot of olive oil, and we are good to go.
I think he rubs some on his face too. He never
we
had
use it in everything.
It's good for everything.
He never had a wrinkle.
My husband joked, he goes, I never even had a bottle of olive oil in the house until I met you, and you use it in like we make olive oil cake and stuff like that.
So do we.
Yes, I mean, it's so good.
Olive oil cake.
But I mean, going back to some of the other things that Kristin also talked about, I thought it was just really tangible what she was talking about when it comes to just, we've all heard stay away from the scale and focus on your metabolic health. And so with those foods, we're not cutting things out. It's really focusing on eating those healthy things and getting away from being attached to, gosh, I weighed this in high school. I can get back to those days, and really taking that old pair of jeans out of the back of the closet, trying to fit in those and using those as measurements of success and health.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that speaks to you ladies at all.
Yeah, it does for me. You know, in high school, true story, I became obsessed with the scale.
Yeah.
And
I think we all did.
Yeah, and it took a toll on me mentally.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a doctor at the time, and she told me, just stop stepping on the scale.
Yeah.
Because it's not good for you.
No.
And to be honest, through my adult life, you know, here and there I will check in, and it's usually when I'm feeling like, oh, I lost a few pounds, which is also not great.
Yeah.
But I really try to stay away from the scale because it's not good for me mentally. And again, that stems from me as a teenager. But I think a lot of women actually, I think it's a lot of us.
Right.
You know, the scale is scary. It can be scary.
It can. And it can create anxiety.
Exactly.
I mean, think of younger girls. I mean, you brought up high school, same thing. I mean, and isn't it interesting? You probably remember I would obsess about a 2-pound difference. I mean,
Holly,
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Right.
So I think it's how you feel.
Exactly.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, I look at how I feel. It's so ridiculous in my dresses.
Yes.
If I feel good in my dresses, my work dresses usually, because sometimes they're more fitted, I'm like, okay, I feel like, I drank enough olive oil today.
Yeah.
But if they're feeling tight, and again, this is how I base it, and I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do, it's just me personally, then I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm overindulging a little bit.
Right.
So That's how I base it. But I agree with her. I think the scale can be scary.
It can. It can. And I mean, I will admit, I was pulling one of her don'ts where it was tracking. You know, I have an app that I can plug in my food. Like if I was like, okay, I really have to get back on track, and I'm plugging in my food, and she said that can lead to some obsession, which made me think, I was like, did I get obsessive? Was I then like cutting things out? Was I trying to eat less in an unhealthy way?
Right.
So, but then again, logging, journaling, sometimes that works for people. So if it's that important to you, but you worry about your mental health surrounding it, that's where you go and you seek out maybe a dietitian or somebody professional to help with what you're doing, because it can lead to a slippery slope.
It is.
And it's something I don't want to mirror for my daughters.
Exactly.
I was just going to say,
we're measuring this out, and
our kids are all watching us, you know, and what I love about her is that she gives us grace. She's forgiving. She doesn't say don't ever have the sweet.
Right.
And you know, that's I think something that we all need to realize too, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to never have a cookie.
Right.
Come January.
I just ate chocolate before I came on set.
Listen, and it felt good, right?
It did.
Sometimes I'm the same. Like I just want to, especially during the holiday season, I just wanted a taste.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I just want to try that. And sometimes if I get a taste, or maybe a whole cookie, or whatever it is,
it's enough.
It's enough.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you need. But I do agree. Everything in moderation. Don't deprive yourself, because then, the floodgates open, and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had this for weeks or months, so let me maybe overindulge.
Yeah. And I think exercise, as she pointed out,
Yes.
is a better goal to have, of measuring strength or endurance, or just combining that with some of the cutting out of sugars, eliminating some of those unhealthy habits. Maybe no potato chips for a day, and you've gone for a 2-mile walk or something. Because, I mean, Holly, you talk about mental health all the time, and the benefits of exercise.
Oh gosh.
And how that can spur on even more motivation and motivation in your whole life.
If you're exercising, I mean, you're going to feel better. It does reduce stress, and then when you start looking better, you're not going to want to mess it up eating chips.
So true. So true.
It's like just this,
Yeah. And I feel like if I exercise, especially in the morning, and all of this is, you have to figure out what works for you. Some people love exercising in the afternoon, but when I get that exercise in the morning, then I feel at lunch, I'm not reaching for those foods that are like, oh, I'm kind of tired. Or just, like I've already gone for a run. I'm going to drink a bunch of water because I just exercised, and now I'm going to have that salad and I'm going to feel good. It's like, it sort of sets up natural, healthy
It sets up your day.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like when I'm like, okay, I made it to the gym this morning, I am not screwing this up for the day. And it does. It makes me feel better.
Yeah. And then what she pointed out too with metabolism, I thought that was really fascinating. And we keep hearing about all these studies because we love to blame our metabolism after our 20s and say, well, I'm getting older. And then now we're learning that it doesn't really affect us until we're in our 60s. So not having those excuses of, well, I'm old, I can't.
No excuse.
No, I mean, but it does change. Our body density changes. Our bodies do change, but not really our metabolism, which I thought was fascinating.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've made excuses like, oh, I'm not in high school anymore.
Right.
But that is an interesting perspective. It's all about really what you're doing, and it's not till later in life. Which is just really interesting.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do shots of olive oil,
please. We're going to drink red wine.
What else?
Right.
We're drinking a lot of red wine. And we're going to exercise.
And we're going to exercise.
Let's go for walks with our red wine.
Yeah, okay.
But at least I hope that this at least made people think about what are those things that we can do, breaking up those goals month by month and in little increments that maybe set you just on a path. Because no matter what, we just want to feel good, right? Yeah. We just want to feel that we are at our best selves. And hopefully 2023 is that year for everybody. That's what I'm hoping. So, yeah.
Thanks for having us.
All right, ladies, thanks for sitting with me and chatting about this. And then
I think we all got skinnier just doing this.
I think so too.
All of us Italians, we used our hands for talking, so we burned some calories
so true.
doing this. So, and thanks to all of you for joining us here on Mom Squad. We'll see you right back here next week.